Honorable Rector, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, but above all students. We're in a university, so above all students. It's a great honor to give this lecture here tonight at the university. What I will try to do is to introduce you a bit to the vision of the European Environment Agency on how we can come from a society that is unsustainable in its systems of production and consumption to a society that moves towards real sustainability. And I will do that illustrating the basic knowledge that we have in the agency and giving a vision of the future. But let's first give a 2-minute brief introduction to the European Environment Agency. We are an official institution of the EU system. We are an independent knowledge provider underpinning climate and environment policies, primarily in the EU. We work with 39 countries in Europe, the 28 of the EU and 11 more countries, from Iceland to Turkey, over Liechtenstein and other Switzerlands. And so we work with all of these countries, and in essence we do three things. We gather all the data and the information from all of those countries on water quality, air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, and we make sense of this at the European level, allowing policymakers to drive informed policies. Secondly, we do work which we call integrated assessments, which is actually connecting the dots. We, for example, monitor the evolution of transport, and then we look at air quality and we connect that to human health. That's an integrated assessment. And thirdly, we are also a sort of in-house think tank of the European system, because we bring new ideas and new knowledge to European policymakers. I'm going to take the clicker here, and I'm going to move away from the podium because I don't speak well when I'm fixed in a spot. Yeah. I assume that you can all understand me. Yeah, I was an old professor, so I'm used to speaking in this sort of auditorium. Yeah. Let me first start by showing you this slide. This is a little movie that shows you the temperature on the planet since the late 19th century. And you can see we're now at the turn of the 20th century. Indeed, the temperature on the planet moves. And so maybe the climate skeptics are right. This is a natural system. It cools and it heats and it cools and it heats. But now we're at World War II. You will see the cold winter in Russia. We're into the 50s and 60s. The climate, the temperature is still changing. The 70s, Mao dies. And we start to enter a process of fast globalization of the emerging economies. 2010, we're now in 2017. Yeah? These are images coming from the US, from NASA and NOAA, which allows me to say, Houston, we have a problem, right? So this is one introductory slide. The other introductory slide is to frame the challenge of the 21st century in the following way. We all live on a planet. Each country here is a dot, and we all want a good life on this planet. And there is no ethical category that you can use to deny anybody on this planet, in principle, a good life. Which means we want education, health, food, security, all the things that you and I enjoy, but billions of people on this planet don't, right? Now, in the 21st century, we will have to do that within the limits of the planet, which means based on water, forest, oceans, biodiversity, the climate that we have. If we do that, good life, within the limits of the planet, we should be in the green box. Yeah? You can now see in how many countries, and the red dots are the EU countries, in how many countries we are leading a good life within the limits of the planet. Not a single one. Yeah? But in the 20th century, we had a theory that told us that we would get there in the following way. First, we all get wealthy, and we have a good life, and we use a lot of resources and we pollute a lot. And then we start to organize ourselves, and we will move into the green box. Economists know this as the environmental Kuznets curve. Yeah, there are two small problems with it. First of all, it doesn't work. It works for industrial pollution, but not for footprint and resource use. And the second one is equally fundamental. If we would first need to move 7 billion people into the polluting part, and then down, the green box would be gone. Yeah? So it doesn't make any sense.
The story of the 21st century is this. We all need to get there as fast as we can, with the biggest responsibility for those countries who are now most polluting and have been doing that historically, and for those who don't have a functional system yet of electricity, for example, to leapfrog technology and immediately move into a system that is adapted to the 21st century. Yeah? Now, none of this is a law of physics. Yeah? It's policy, it's choices, it's governance, it's technology that we drive. In the US, for the moment, they are making the opposite choice. Yeah? They are deconstructing actively even the most fundamental water and air quality policies, which means they are going in that direction. I say that not to bash on the US. We work together with the US EPA, so we know a bit what is happening there. This is exactly what is happening. Yeah? Now, the response to this challenge in the 21st century is captured by the Sustainable Development Goals. 17 goals agreed by the world after years of discussions in 2015. They are interconnected. Yeah? It goes from no poverty to no hunger, good health, quality education, but it's on clean water, renewable energy, on sustainable communities, responsible consumption, climate action, water, land, all of these issues. Yeah? This is a framework that is globally accepted. And I always say you can see that it's globally accepted because it's in my lifetime the first global policy framework that I see people wearing on their vest. The circle of these goals is a pin that you can buy, yeah? And you see NGO people, scientists, ministers, commissioners, they wear it. Yeah? So there is a global challenge there that is recognized. The European response to this, for the moment, is captured by the 7th Environment Action Programme. It is the policy program that binds the European institutions, the Parliament, the Commission and the Council, which means all the member states, to working on a planet that is living well within the limits of our, or living well within the limits of the planet, which is my green quadrant, right? Now, in order to do that, this 7th Environment Action Programme says we need to do three things, three fundamental shifts in society. The first one is that we go from high carbon to low carbon. Yeah? It's the Paris Agreement, it's the low carbon society, that transition. The second one is that we go from a linear model of production and consumption, where we, in essence, you could say simplified, we dig up resources, we build products that are not terribly well built, and that are not lasting very long and not made to repair and all of that. At the end of their lifetime, we pretend that we do recycling, in some countries more than in others. It's usually downcycling, because we don't have a really good approach to really recuperating those materials, and then we're done and we dig up new resources and we do that. The circular economy means, in essence, that we keep the value of the resources and the physical resources longer in the economy. Yeah? And the third thing is often forgotten. That is that we need to protect our natural capital much more fundamental. Yeah? It's ecosystems, biodiversity, which is fundamental. Yeah? It also means that we need to rethink maybe our basic concept of sustainable development. This is what I grew up with as a student, yeah? Where and it's still used a lot in communication and even in education at university level, which I think we should change. Yeah? Is that we say that sustainability is you have a social, an economic, and ecological sphere, and where they magically overlap, we draw the arrow and we say sustainable development. I would say, of course not. It's nonsensical, because on a finite planet you cannot have a little bit of sustainability. Yeah? So, the real challenge of living well within the limits of the planet is, this is how we frame it in the Environment Agency. And what we say is, within the planet means that we have to deal with the ecosystems that we have. That is the boundary condition of the 21st century. Within that, we need to organize the systems that provide our well-being, which is, we narrow it down to 4 key systems: the energy system, the food system, the transport system, and the urban metabolism or urban system. Yeah? So the challenge is to organize that while embracing, recognizing, and working with this boundary condition of the ecosystems, yeah? Which also means we need to step away from this other nonsense, which is to say that we use 1.6 planets per year. There is no 0.6 planet. Yeah? It's not there. It just means that we are overusing, depleting, and degrading the one planet that we have, thus reducing the probability that we will live with 10 billion people on this one planet very well every single day. That is the challenge we frame. By the way, if you think this man is sounding a bit like a radical environmentalist, I'm not. I'm not. This is the approach that is agreed by all the member states, yeah, by the Parliament and by the Commission. I can tell you most of them are not radical environmentalists. Yeah? Okay, so it also means that there is an implicit order in these sustainable development goals. The biosphere, natural capital, is the foundational capital of any society. Yeah? Then we get society, because that's where the good life is. And in order to reach that, we will need a functional economy. Yeah? Even today, this is often turned around. Yeah? We make decisions in politics and in economics by turning this around. And then it looks like a toll, one of these things that spins around. And we know what happens with these tolls. They lose speed after a while and then they tip over. Yeah? That is the non-sustainable trajectory. I'll try to frame it in one other way, because things appeal in different ways to different audiences. What we have seen in the last decades especially is what some scientists call the great acceleration. Yeah? We see an enormous increase in population, in GDP, but also in fertilizer consumption, energy use, water use, transportation, all of these things. Yeah? This is the globalization for the last 30, 40 years of unsustainable systems of production and consumption. We notice on the Earth system trends that indeed this has an impact. CO2, carbon dioxide, NOx, nitrous oxide, methane, ocean acidification, nitrogen to coastal zones, land degradation, tropical forest loss. This is the evolution that we see, and yet we have policies that are promising a flat line or a declining line. Now, if the evolution for 50 years has been this, and we now have policies that say in the next 3.5 decades we will do this or go down, there are obvious questions to be asked. Yeah? But first, is this real? Are we promising that? Yes. In lands or forests, it's called no net loss. That's part of the policies. In forests, it's called halting forest loss, halting biodiversity loss. In it going down, it is climate change. We will cut emissions by 2050 by 90% in Europe. So this is what we are promising. Now, these are the obvious questions. How feasible is this? How credible is this? And what type of knowledge do we need for that? Yeah? And of course, knowledge comes from universities primarily. So this is a challenge also for universities. Yeah? Okay, now we make choices to get there in a highly political context. Yeah? And I added these slides today because I knew that the poli-sci students were coming. So this slide is for you. You are the political science students, right? Okay, so this is the policy context. Any debate about this in the European Parliament is embedded in the following discourses. I'll be fast. Some of them say, yeah, this is capitalism. This is what you get with capitalism. Yeah? Others say, no, no, no. We need to use the logic of capitalism and the market dynamics to make it into green capitalism. Yeah? Some say we need a high-tech solution for everything. Others say, no, no, we need to think of other ways of living. Voluntary simplicity. Yeah? This is very visible in the debates. Eh? Some people say it's all about these big companies that shove a certain model of production and consumption towards us. Others say we need to really address consumption. Yeah? And that's the anti-consumption movement or the anti-consumerism campaign, these things. Yeah? things are, every time you spend money, you're casting a vote for the kind of world you want. This is about diet change. This is a book called The Lazy Environmentalist. Yeah? If you make the following 50 easy choices, you will transform the planet. Well, probably not. Yeah? The choices are not easy. And secondly, the danger of this is, by putting all the responsibility on the consumer, you individualize the responsibility, while we all know that as a consumer you make choices in a system of production and consumption. So where's the balance, right? Other things are no growth. Yeah? This growth is not possible to maintain. It's population, sir. You never address that. Well, we actually do. There are quite a bit of things that talk about population. This is the T-shirt that the youth representative at one of the last climate COPs was wearing, Conference of the Parties, the big climate meeting every year. You have been negotiating all my life. You cannot tell me you need more time. Yeah? Well, in fact, we started negotiating climate change in 1990. We're now 28 years later, and the net result of that in the environment is about 54% more greenhouse gases. I can understand that young people say, really old folks, shape up, you know? Wait, I mean, you really... Oh, I'm destroying the clicker here, I'm sorry. I will refund you for this. No problem. Yeah? Okay. Some people look at justice. You can hardly claim that if the 1% richest people on the planet own as much as the 90% other people on this planet, that this is a fertile ground for a really sustainable society. I mean, there are some real reflections to be made there. Some people look at it at a philosophical way, yeah, where we should see ourselves in a holistic setting of the planet, yeah. And some people say, well, if we can spend so much on the military budget, what is all the fuss about $1 billion here and there for the environment? Huh? Okay, I rushed you through it. I just wanted to signal that all those debates, you can bring rational information and technological information, but they take place in a complex political debate where people have very different opinions about society and about the choices we should be making. Now, depending on what we do the next decades, this could be our best century ever or our worst century ever. That's the really thrilling news. Yeah? So, we have some real choices to make. Now, in order to explain to you why I think we really need to make different choices, we need a paradigm shift, I will do what my old professor at the university used to do. Every month he would wave with an old book. And he would say, read this old book, it's not because it's old that it's not relevant. Yeah? And so I went to an old book, Thomas Kuhn, yeah, 1960s, on the logic of scientific revolutions. And Kuhn says science does not go in big shocks normally. Yeah? Science responds to a society in which it is embedded. It organizes itself in that way in faculties and universities and sub-faculties that have their journals and sub-journals and all of that. Yeah? And then reality is changing, and all of a sudden science is no longer adapted to the big questions of reality, and then you go through a rapid revolution. Yeah? I use this analogy also with policies. Yeah? So I will walk you through what I call the Kuhnian circle. Yeah? Don't worry, I will not bore you with the philosophy of science or with epistemology. I will illustrate exactly what I think Kuhn is saying. Kuhn says in normal science, he calls it the puzzle-solving stage, we're addressing the issues in society. Well, I go to this document that I mentioned, the 7th Environment Action Programme, the binding document on European policies. And what does it say? It says that over the past 40 years, European environmental legislation has addressed a lot of the problems. And that is true. There is no other place on the planet where 28 countries under binding legislation have addressed in such a comprehensive way so many issues of environment and climate. We live in the best place on the planet that addresses climate issues. Yeah? What is the policy theory behind that? Initially it was fighting pollution. You know, water quality, air quality, the fundamentals. Yeah? And what is the knowledge paradigm? Well, it is based on formal scientific research, and on the basis of that, we do monitoring, data, we gather data, indicators and assessments. That's the work of the agency. Yeah? Okay, so then Kuhn says we start to see anomalies. And what do you do then? you blame the apparatus, you set aside the problem, and you modify the paradigm. The same document talks about we have issues of concern, cause for concern, not least due to insufficient implementation. In other words, you blame the apparatus. There is nothing wrong with the analysis, there is nothing wrong with the medicine. You should just take your 3 pills in the morning at 8 o'clock when we told you so, and not at 7 o'clock, and not 2 pills. It's implementation. Is there something to be said for that? Certainly. A lot of European policies are poorly implemented in the member states. The waste policy is a typical example of that. And I think in Cyprus you have a few problems with the implementation of that policy as well. Also, it says that we can solve this with existing environmental technology and market-based instruments. Again, don't question the analysis, just do more and better of the same. We modified the paradigm, however. We talk about efficiency now. In the late 1990s, or 1990s and early 2000s, we started to add a lot of efficiency thinking. We don't question the systems, we need to make them more efficient. And we also produced knowledge on that. Yeah? So do we see these anomalies? Because I'm saying this to you, but is there an empirical basis for this? Yes, there is. Yeah? This is a table from our report, State and Outlook of the Environment 2015, and you say that's old stuff. We do this every 5 years. The next one is in preparation, right? Let's focus on the first column, the trends that we analyze. These are all policies in Europe, often 10, 15, 20 directives. We monitor them. Yeah. Where are we in the green here? I hope that the colors are intuitive. Yeah? Where are we doing well? It is where you read water quality and air pollution. We do well. Why? It is the paradigm. We fight pollution. That's what we do, and we do it well. We see a lot of progress. Yeah? Where are we in the red? Where you read freshwater biodiversity, soil functions, biodiversity, ecosystems, climate change. Those are all systemic issues. This is very important knowledge because it means that getting bad chemicals out of a water body, which is water quality policies, does not necessarily translate into strong aquatic ecosystems. There is a disconnect there. Because that was what they were expecting. Yeah? So this doesn't work. It's systemic issues. Yeah? Another priority in the 7th Environment Action Program is risks to health. By now you know the story. Where are we in the green? Where you read water pollution? Of course, that's what we do. Yeah? Where are we in the red? Climate change and chemicals. 2 systemic issues. Climate change, obvious. Chemicals, to give you an idea, 130,000 chemicals on the market. The latest estimate is that 60% of those are toxic for human beings and the environment. This is a systemic issue. Yeah? Okay. Is this challenging policies? Yes, it is. Here's a huge anomaly. In 2001, the EU said we will hold my flat line. Remember in my blue arrows? We will halt biodiversity loss. We did the analysis by 2010. We did the analysis in our agency, no progress. So in 2011, the EU said we'll do it by 2020. Yeah? We are doing the analysis for 2020. I can tell you we see very little progress. So now the real question becomes the following. Yeah? What's next? 2030? Or are we going to ask the real questions? What are the drivers of this biodiversity loss? And that means that we need to ask very different questions that are systemic. The 2 main drivers of biodiversity loss in most countries are the following. Landscape fragmentation, which means building everywhere, yeah, in an uncoordinated way, and our current system of agriculture. Yeah? Those are the 2 main drivers. We need to address those, or otherwise in 2030 we'll say, we didn't make it, maybe we can try 2040 this time. Yeah? So that's where we are. Dan Kuhn says we get into a crisis. Yeah? A crisis. And he says the anomalies become too problematic and he uses then apocalyptic language. Faith in the paradigm is shaken. Yeah? Okay. Do we see this in European documents? Yes. That same 7th Environment Action Program says in that same text, current wasteful production and consumption systems of the world economy leads to more pollution, increased global greenhouse gas emissions, land degradation, deforestation, biodiversity loss. This is the same document that says that we have the best system on the planet. It's a bit of an anomaly that is uneasy, right? Okay, we in our State and Outlook of the Environment report, we say that incremental policy approaches, I call it the salami approach. Yeah? Let's cut off a little slice every year, don't rock the boat, and then we hope we can change from a salami to something else. It doesn't work that way. Huh? So we need a fundamental rethinking. Do we see this? Yes. I showed you 2 tables. There is a 3rd one embedded in the 78B, Environment Action Program. If you turn those to the side and you look at past trends and you look at our best scientific estimate for the next 20 years, the most obvious thing is that the green disappears. Yeah? Well, if you have the best environment policy program on the planet and the green disappears, you could say that you have a paradigm that is a bit problematic. Yeah? It doesn't function. Yeah? There are serious issues with this. Yeah? Now, this is the core anomaly in the system. Yeah? If you look at the institutional approach, in the 60s it started with the first legislation. We built institutions, university programs, European laws, global laws, all of that, more and more institutions. Yeah? So we are addressing the problem for the last 60 years. Yeah? Now, this is in the same timeline, the environmental state of the planet. Yeah? Oh, that's a bit of an anomaly, right? A bad statistician would say, let's please get rid of these institutions because they seem to be bad for the environment. Yeah? But of course, correlation is not causality. Yeah? So, what is then at stake? Well, there are different explanations. One explanation is what we call the counterfactual. Some people spend the whole academic career illustrating that if we would not have done all of that, it would be worse. I guess that is true, but that's not exactly what motivates me to get out of bed in the morning and to do my job, right? It could have been worse. Yeah, I guess so. But that's not what I want to do, right? Or we have an implementation gap. That's true, but even if we close it, we will not change the fundamental drivers of unsustainability. We need better regulation, that is true. Or there is a time lag effect. Let's wait for a couple of decades, these processes are slow. Yeah? Well, our analysis is that these institutional solutions do not address the real problems. Yeah? They don't address the real problems. So let me illustrate this you by this. This, we start in don't start throwing things at me. We start in 1990. This is the sector of transport. These are greenhouse gas emissions. It's the only sector in Europe that has been adding emissions consistently. Yeah? Also in Cyprus, by the way, yeah? And rather massively. We thought in 2000, so all the other sectors go down. In 2008, 2007, we thought finally we've reached the peak. No, it was the economic crisis. As soon as the economy started picking up again, this is the trend line. Yeah? Okay, now we promised in European policies that we would be there in 2030 and there in 2050. If we stay with the current solutions, there is not a snowball's chance in hell that we will get there. Yeah? Not. Yeah? So, this is 25 years of efficiency gains and fighting pollution. The policy. Yeah? This is the lack of decoupling. That decoupling means that you move your economy in a certain direction, but you decouple it from energy use and resource use. Okay, so there is a gap to be closed. Let me illustrate it in a more visual way. Yeah? This is the efficiency paradigm. Our engines in cars are now more efficient and less polluting than they were 20 years ago. We know there were some measurement and reporting issues. Yeah? We were witnesses in the European Parliament for the Dieselgate scandal. Yeah? Some people say this is the systemic solution. We will all then switch to an electric car. Let's assume they will start to be cheaper than the Tesla, yeah? And we all start driving it. Is that systemic? Yeah, it's a very different technology. You can link these batteries to a flexible network of energy. You can deal with intermittency issues. But this would still be the Rue de la Bois, the main street in Brussels, or the highway here coming into Limassol, or into Nicosia, because we would all use that same technology at the same time with 1.2 people in the car. We use a car 6% of the time on average, so this is not a solution. Maybe this guy, you cannot see him, this is a cyclist, a lone cyclist. Maybe that guy is more of an innovation in the Brussels system, and so maybe this in cities, and I'm not saying in all cities, is more of an innovation. This is Copenhagen, right next to my office. Are there traffic jams in Copenhagen? Yes, once in a while there are traffic jams for bicyclists. You have to wait one light before you can go through the light. And in the meantime, the cars are there, or fewer. Okay, anyway. Okay, then Kuhn says we get a change in worldview, and he calls it a Gestalt shift. Yeah? And we all know you put a German word on it, it's serious business, right? So, a Gestalt shift. It means that we start to see the world and the problems in a different way, and our own position in it in a different way. So, do we see this in the 7th Environment Action Program? Yes, all of a sudden, what we used to call an externality, not part of the system, biodiversity is essential to human well-being and economic prosperity. Oh, that's a very different view. It is, yeah? And we need science and knowledge, and this is about you, yeah? That is system science, systemic risks, megatrends, interplay. In science you call it nexus issues with the modern language. Transitions in production and consumption systems, all of that. So real changes. Do we see this change in understanding? Yes, I think in Europe there are two. One is the Anthropocene. It's for the first time in the planet that we're in an era that the planet looks primarily what it looks like because of human beings, not because of plate tectonics and other stuff, human beings, right? The other thing is, of course, that Europe is increasingly small on a global scale. Yeah? We are 8 or 9% of the global population. The economy is shrinking in terms of its relative weight. So how do we deal with that? Yeah? Well, the Gestalt shift in problem analysis and responses, we call it transitions. Fundamental changes to the systems that are unsustainable. And that's not only technology, it's financing, it's ownership, it's business models, it's all of that. Yeah? Let me illustrate this. In the car system, this is system optimization. This is making the combustion engine better. Yeah? This is all moving into an electric car. And this means we think of sustainable transport and mobility systems. Yeah? And a city like Copenhagen is moving in that direction. 83% of the mobility in a city of 1 million is walking, cycling, or public transport. Yeah? We have 210 people working in the agency. We have 0 parking spots. Yeah? Not a single one. People complain in our agency as well, as they do everywhere, but never about the lack of parking spots. What on earth would you do with a car in Copenhagen anyway, to come to work? Yeah? So there is a transition there that is in the making. Yeah? Now Europe is responding to this with what we call macro-integrated policies. They bundle a number of policies across departments, policy coherence. One of it is, of course, the low-carbon economy and the energy union, where countries, also Cyprus, will have to submit a plan for 2030 on how you will link climate and energy goals en route to 2050. It's the circular economy strategy and the bioeconomy strategy, and then a strategy on natural capital and how it underpins society. These are long-term, yeah, integrated, they're systemic. You cannot decarbonize transportation with a combustion engine. There is no way. Yeah? They're developing and iterative. You need to revisit them not only with better policies, but also with better knowledge and better science and better technology. Yeah? They require different governance, and they are for the moment lacking knowledge. I'm almost full circle here. Kuhn then says we move into the pre-paradigm phase, yeah, where you have competing concepts. I have given a talk a number of times with the title Europe's Emerging Transition Agenda, Making Sense of the Green, Blue, Circular, Resource Efficient, Low Carbon, Biosmart Digital Economy. Yeah? Why do I use all these terms? Because they are used by commissioners, by ministers, by people who are working in this field. They're not all compatible. You can have a bioeconomy that is bad for the climate or one that is good for climate. You can have a circular economy that doesn't take climate into account or one that contributes to it. So we need to reflect on what this means. Usually they pour a sauce over it as well that is called big data, artificial intelligence and blockchain. That's the last year you need to mention blockchain as well. If you tick all the boxes, you've given a relevant talk. So, what we understand is that if you want these things to change, you need multiple innovations. And I think this is a sort of direction also for universities. People need to understand that their little domain actually needs to go hand in hand with other people's domain if you want to contribute to societal changes. In the car system, it's not only the engine, it's maybe a totally different type of vehicle. Yeah, that's of course with IT. Maybe it's the sharing economy. I don't have a car, but I can use one when I want to, because I have a pass that allows me, through an app, to use an electric vehicle in Copenhagen when I want it. But I don't want to own it, I want the service of the car. Yeah? Maybe we need to look at the car as only a part of a really sustainable mobility system, and maybe we don't need to displace ourselves at all. We should make much more use of other technologies, which we do in our spare time, but not in our professional time. Yeah? I can tell that a lot of you are doing it now, in the back there. You know, so that is what is happening. We also need to reflect seriously on the policy implications of knowledge. This is the limits of the planet, the planetary boundary circle, where if you are beyond this, you are in the danger zone. And of course, climate change is important, and we discuss it a lot, but it's biodiversity loss and the nitrogen cycle, which is what I talked about, and the food system, that are the big issues. Yeah? Do we really understand that? We need to reflect also on the long term. If Europe is cutting its greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030, we can get there by putting all our money, technology, and the young brains that we form into perfecting the current systems. We will get there, but we lock ourselves into those systems and we will never get to 2050. The real challenge is to get to 2030 by opening pathways to 2050. And that means that if you're an engineering student, you need a different type of knowledge. Your R&D policies in this country need a different direction, and you need to invest in different science and different infrastructure. Yeah? I will skip this one. Are there magic potions? Yeah? Ooh, this is going to solve it. Yeah? Well, some people say big data. We work with big data in the agency, but big data is a solution if you can make it a solution. There's also a lot of data out. I always say if big data creates more noise, it's not helpful. We need to create better sound out of it. Yeah? That is what we need to do with big data. Artificial intelligence, sure, we will start working with it, but I think there's a lot of space above our own head to use our own intelligence a bit better. Yeah? I think there's a lot of scope for improvement there, quite frankly. Is it connecting everybody to everything, the Internet of Things? That can help. Is it spatial observation? We do that. We are the biggest user of Copernicus satellite data in Europe when it applies to environmental analysis. And then we enter into a new paradigm. Yeah? We're not there yet, but that is happening. What are policy characteristics that one needs to get there? Consistency. You cannot change policies on your energy system with every new government. That makes no sense. It requires decades of investments. Policy coherency. If your tax system says you're going this way and your environment policy says you're going that way, it makes no sense. Yeah. Strong implementation, and there are countries where that is an issue. Yeah. A sense of urgency. Yeah. A visionary policy, and an engaging policy. You cannot do this with government departments. This is a societal project. Yeah? So this is a question for a university as well. What role do you want to play in this societal project? Yeah? Okay. So we need to have a credible trajectory for this best century. Is the current knowledge system adequate? Where do we stand on critical knowledge developments? And this is also for universities. Yeah? Where do you stand on teaching students that they need to think in systems? Complexity theory, forward-looking knowledge. We specialize in working with students, and I can say we because I'm still a bit of a professor. Yeah? We specialize in predicting the past. We have a lot of data on the past. Should we not start to develop methods that can look forward to 2030 and 2050? There is work to be done. Yeah? Do we need to reinvent economics? Yeah? The first class in economics, there are 3 factors of production: capital, labor, and land. Yeah? Now it's natural resources, and then we teach students for 4 years on capital and on labor, and in the last year they're allowed to take an elective course in environmental economics. This is completely unadapted to the 21st century. Yeah? So there are things to reflect on in economics, methodological innovation. All of this needs to become part of the knowledge production. In universities as well, there is a lot of debate academically, and students, I hope that you will not be subjected to this. What makes the difference between interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary? I always thought I have no time for these academic debates about the gender of the angels. Just work together, right? Are there methods to do that? Yes. The Tallinn University in Estonia is one of the leading examples in how to do this. I can connect you to the rector there if you want to. We've been working with them on this. So, other types of innovation. How about citizen science? Empowering citizens, training citizens and not only scientists, co-creation, co-design, all these things that are happening around us. And if universities are not in the center of this knowledge development, they will be surpassed by others. Because it is happening. Yeah? Mostly in the private market, but as a public institution, I think we have a role to play in making this type of approach valuable for society, for public goods. That's, I think, a strong belief. I will now show you, and I have 1 more minute to go, a bunch of slides on obesity in the US. Okay. Why did I pick the US? Because I didn't find these slides for Europe. Every click is 1 year. It's BMI. The percentage points don't matter. Every click is 1 year. Yeah? Okay. This is 86, 7, 8, 9, 90, 91, 92, 93, 4, 5, 96, 97. We need a different color. Yeah, it must be getting serious. Yeah, 98, 99, 2000, 2001. Another color appears. 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Which state is that? Colorado, where I studied, were the stronghold against obesity in the US. Yes, no, we disappeared. Sadly, okay. 2010, okay. Why am I showing this? You could say, why on earth is this man showing slides on obesity? The following question is here for a university setting. Do we train students to reflect on these slides as a systemic issue? Yeah. This is a health issue. It's a mobility issue in a society that is becoming more and more car dependent. There are others like that in Europe as well, as you may well know. Yeah? It is an urbanization issue. It is a food system issue that is adding fat, sugar, and salt to everything we eat. It is a psychological issue. Do we train students? Do we form knowledge to reflect on this type of rapid transition? Yeah? And we will need rapid transitions in the next decades. This is the type of systemic reflection we should be working on. Because this type of issue, if you really want to address it, would require an inter-, multi- or transdisciplinary team. I couldn't care less how you call it, but that's the type of approach we need. Europe is standing in front of enormous challenges. We need a different type of knowledge, a different type of policies. Universities are at the heart and center of it. as they produce the foundational knowledge that we use as an agency to discuss with policymakers. Yeah? One last thing, some people say sustainable development is about the next generations. I guess that's true, but it takes away a bit of the urgency. It's about this generation. Yeah? If you are born today in Europe, especially as a girl, you will be 82 years old in 2100. On average in Europe, you will be alive. This is your lifetime, you know. Circular economy, climate change, biodiversity loss, desertification of Cyprus, water shortages, tropical diseases that are, I mean, it's this generation, yeah? So there is a sense of urgency there, which means that in our responsibility as academics, as knowledge people, we have to embrace the boundary conditions of the 21st century. As an agency, we are ready to do that, but we badly need the core scientific community to be on board, because this is where the challenge is. I will leave it at that. I'm of course happy to respond to any criticism or comments or suggestions. Thank you very much.